What does it take to make workshops work? And how can we facilitate collaboration that sticks and leads to results? My name is Miriam Hatmas, and with the Workshops Work podcast, I'm on the mission to find the magic ingredients that make workshops work. Today with me on the show is the one and only Sunni Brown. And we geek out about facilitation, what it takes to be a great facilitator. And she shares how she got from visual recording to writing a book, Gamestorming, and where she's heading now, creating amazing experiences and teaching collaboration. So stay tuned. And by the way, if you don't have pen and paper at hand to take your own notes, scroll down to the show notes to download my free one-page summary. And now, lean back and be inspired. Sunni, I am thrilled to have you here on the show with me.
Thank you. I'm so excited to see you again.
Yes. And I'm very curious. I just mentioned before we hit the record button, I'm very curious in which direction this conversation will go.
I know. And I think we should have more than one.
Yes, we already know.
I just feel like
I think every one of our exploration calls, air quotes, could have been a podcast recording. And let's start with the beginning.
Yeah.
When did you start calling yourself a facilitator?
Oh, God, that's a good question. So I started hanging out with facilitators in 2004. And I feel like I didn't adopt the term for myself until probably 2009. So I was a graphic recorder for a bunch of those years, but I was always hanging out with facilitators, you know what I mean? And I was like, I really thought that they were more mature and capable than I was at the time. And I think that was probably accurate. I was in my 20s and I couldn't have held space for a large group of people. I couldn't hardly hold space for myself even. So yeah, probably I would say 2009, I felt comfortable stepping into that space because I don't think of it as a triviality title. I think of it as not a responsibility in a heavy way, but something that you grow into.
Yeah.
And so yeah, probably 2009. Yeah.
What has shifted in 2009?
That's a good question. Probably saw enough because you know what graphic recorders are, I'm assuming.
Yes. So, and for the audience.
Yeah.
In a nutshell?
In a nutshell, we're large scale live visual note takers in a nutshell. And what's beautiful about that career, which I coach and support people when they want to move into that career, is that you get exposed to all kinds of content and all kinds of people and all kinds of environments. And you witness facilitators, you witness people who are leading events, you witness people who are designing experiences for other people. And so I think I just had done that enough. And, I worked at the Grove in the Bay Area. And so I knew sort of the process of designing and like exploring and designing agendas for meetings. And so it's a natural evolution. For graphic recorders, it's not uncommon that we become graphic facilitators. And so, yeah, I think it called to me too, though. I think it was part of my journey as a person growing up because it's not something I was aiming to be. I just it naturally occurred. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Nobody graduates from high school thinking that they want to be a facilitator.
Exactly. And I'm so curious about you too. I want to know that about you. Is that okay for me to ask you?
Absolutely. I actually remember the situation. I don't remember the date maybe, but I started hosting workshops. I call them idea parties as a meetup. Nice. I just quit my job and was trying all different sorts of things.
Yeah.
And was approached by more and more people who asked me to facilitate workshops or to host workshops and design them and being paid for it. So that was cool. Mm-hmm. And then I read Priya Parker's book, The Art of Gathering. And there she used the term facilitator. I was like, that's it. There's a name for what I'm doing. So I put it on a sticky note. So I am a facilitator.
Wow. So that you didn't even have the term.
I didn't know what it was. And
Isn't that crazy?
And in German, there is no word for facilitator.
What's the closest approximate?
The closest is process moderator.
Oh, that works.
And still there is a difference. So
I wonder what that difference is. And does that mean when you're working in the environment with Germanic peoples, they don't know what you mean when you say
Yes, I recently gave a training to a group of German coaches. And that coaches and trainers. And that was very interesting because until the end, they tried to figure out where facilitation fits amongst group coaching and process moderation.
What would you say the difference is for process moderation and facilitation, just quickly, if you don't mind, again, me asking you a question?
The process moderation comes very close. And then maybe the facilitation brings also everything in that is more of the experience design. Mm-hmm. So what's beyond the process?
Yeah, okay. Awesome.
And the managing people and the mindset. Mm-hmm. So for me, facilitation is actually more about the mindset management than about the activities.
Yes, beautiful.
Yeah. And the coaching, in my understanding, is more that the inward looking. What is the working? How does a group work together as a group? And how can we improve that? Mm-hmm. And facilitation is how can we improve the work that the group does as a group?
Yeah. How can we create a space for them to become a collective doing something and in a direction? Yeah. I think it's really a powerful, it's like an unsung heroic skill, facilitation.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, because I'm sure you probably do it naturally in like other environments. I mean, you know, once you know that that's a skill, then you can use it anywhere. And sometimes you don't want to use it because like other people be responsible for your experience. But, you know, just even like facilitating like a family trip. Like, can we share information more skillfully? Can we like get a consensus around what people want to do more effectively? Like you do, it's like if you're a hairstylist, you're suddenly cutting hair everywhere you go, you know?
With, I think the difference that with a hairstylist, everyone is happy about it and lining up. Whereas with a facilitator, everyone tells you to shut up and to stop facilitating their conversation.
I know if it's unsolicited, you know, but I think most people appreciate it, but it's context specific for sure, you know?
Yeah, I think for me, what has shifted. So in the beginning, I wanted to facilitate all the conversations and my family just got furious with me. And I now realize that the actual superpower that I learned that I also then apply in the podcast interviews, actually the deep listening, synthesizing, paraphrasing, and asking questions.
Totally. Yeah, that's actually what graphic recorders do too. So that's why it's a wonderful entry point into facilitation because you're really doing deep, deep listening. That is your job. And so it trains you. It's like a muscle.
Especially because you're basically the fly on the wall and you have to listen to such a deep level that you can translate the words and the atmosphere into a representative image.
Yeah, it's a lot going on in a graphic recorder's experience. So, you know, it's funny because when I was at like, I would say the peak of my practice, meaning that I was doing it all the time, you know, really like traveling constantly. I felt like, you know, like they describe athletes sometimes where when you're in flow, you can actually anticipate, you know, where the ball's going before somebody's even thrown that thing. That's how I got with conversations. I was like, this is going to head in this direction. And these two people are going to have like a moment of having to crash into each other. Like it was intense because it was, you get in flow states, but I can't get there now because I don't graphically record anymore, but it was a beautiful thing to have that experience. And so I was grateful for having entered into facilitation that way.
And I loved how you described earlier that back then you might not have had the skill to hold yourself, to even dare holding a group.
Yeah, no way. I was not emotionally mature, self-aware. I mean, there was, you know, I was really, I think like many people, just sort of reactionary and opinionated and, you know, easily annoyed. And, you know, I mean, you can't be any of those things when you're holding space for anyone, you know? And so that's another reason I think facilitation is such an incredible skill, especially for modern life, modern times, because I think that I don't see a lot of people that are skillful at those things, even if they are 40 and 50 and 60. I mean, it's not about an age thing. It's really about a state of mind and a state of heart. So I think that we are sort of wisdom keepers in the sense that we're demonstrating how to be and make room for others. And it takes practice.
So how did you learn it?
Facilitation?
Or the holding the space, the not being opinionated, the not being... So all these things that actually make a good facilitator that you rarely read in a textbook about facilitation.
Yeah, that's true. That's so true. Well, I learned mine in a Zendo mostly, because I spent like 15 good years sitting in meditation, not like in a cave or anything, but in a community. And I didn't understand what I was doing. I wasn't trying to get somewhere or trying to learn something. I was really just creating a space for self-soothing and for restoring my well-being and stuff. And then over time, you start recognizing your biases, you start recognizing your beliefs, your perceptions of reality that you're actually responsible for. And you start making peace with those things. And when you do that internally, it fundamentally radiates outward. And so now, none of the facilitators that I was at the Grove, for example, none of them were Zen practitioners, but David Sivit was my original, I was his executive assistant. Do you know who David Sivit is? He is like one of the grandfathers of graphic facilitation in the United States. So I had the great fortune of working for him as his assistant. But he had a spiritual practice, but it wasn't a Zen practice. But so I don't really know how they would have found that state. But for me, it was definitely Zen was a big part of it because it was a constant reflection on where I'm intervening with reality unnecessarily. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also, road testing it. Go ahead. You had a thought.
Yeah. What I hear is the observing what's going on inside without reacting.
Yeah.
Yes, we might get annoyed, but do we have to snap at people? Maybe not.
That's right. And that's actually, that's a function of maturity. That's why, in a way, it's not revelatory. It's like, that's what adults do. That is what a grown-up would do. But there's not a lot of grown-ups, as it turns out. And so, yeah, it's a really, really helpful thing. And I do remember in the early stages, my teacher differentiated responsiveness and reactivity just as a concept. He differentiated it. And then I would observe it in the world. So like if somebody honks at you, you're driving and somebody honks at you, you have choices constantly around how you respond or react to situations. So as a young baby Zen practitioner, I was very attuned to all those opportunities of when I had choice and when I could pause and when I could decide. And over time, you don't have to think about it. It's just part of your being. And so if somebody honks and you're just like, oh, that's interesting. And it doesn't mean anything. You don't make it meaning out of it. And you don't get angry. It's just not personal. It's like, it's a phenomenon in life. And that's what it is. And I'm not saying I occupy that space all the time because it's an energetic, it takes energy. And you do have to practice it over and over and over. And so it's useful in groups. Because in groups, all kinds of stuff happens and, people are people and they're complicated. And I have some great stories. And I didn't know that was going to contribute to my facilitation practice when I was sitting in the Zendo. I didn't make the connection there at all until later. And it's applicable in all parts of your life. So it's very, very valuable, to be in the driver's seat of your experience instead of at someone else's whim.
Yeah. And it starts with the awareness that you actually can.
Oh, it's incredible. It's like, exactly. And here's the thing too. A lot of people have resistance to that insight. Because why? Because it means you're responsible for your experience. And a lot of people don't want to be accountable for what we're experiencing. It has all kinds of implications about how you live. You don't get to blame people for things. You don't get to, rage against the machine all the time. It doesn't mean those things aren't there, like systems of injustice. It doesn't mean they don't exist, but it means that your stance and your composure inside of those systems belongs to you. And I've met plenty of people who don't want that accountability.
Yes, me too.
Yeah, right.
Including very close people, including family members.
Oh, absolutely.
Right up there.
I have a spate of family members that are like, it's exhausting.
And I wonder whether it's because it's so scary to go there. So the moment where I assume responsibility, so someone honking at me, I can get angry at them. So why are they doing this to me?
To me, yeah.
Or I can pause and think, why does it make me angry on a personal level?
Yeah. Absolutely. Like,
What is
what am
going
I
on
making
inside
happy?
of me that I even react emotionally? And I think that's a
Exactly.
difficult part
It's very
because
difficult.
he
Yeah.
doesn't honk because of us. He honks because he didn't have breakfast yet, or
That's
because
the
he was in a
thing.
fight, or
That's right.
she.
Like, there's any number of reasons that are not related to a reflection on our character or our history. It has nothing to do. I call that the inward turn. So the time when your attention turns inward to notice your own experience and your own physiological and emotional reactions. And that turn is night and day difference in terms of how somebody lives. And it is uncomfortable. It is scary, intimidating, and I totally understand why we don't do it. Some people don't do it. They go their whole lives and never do it. And some people are forced to by circumstances,
Yeah.
and some people choose to, by inspiration. It's
Yeah.
just so interesting. Mm-hmm.
And then the beauty is that once you went there, you cannot unsee it, and then it's liberating.
Exactly. And that's the thing. That's the place where I think there's always this longing that I have to sort of invite other people into that liberation space. But that's not really my business. That's their business. But it's kind of like once you see the sunshine, you're like, oh my God, look at the sunshine. But it really is such a like a spiritual formation process. And, there's really good examples like Viktor Frankl, in the Man's Search for Meaning. I mean, he made that clear about even if you're in hellscapes, you have choices and you have options and you have freedom inside of the worst environments, So thank goodness there's many people that have uncovered this universal law,
Yeah.
It's not common.
And how do you help groups? So working with groups, you're confronted with, in the worst case scenario, or maybe in the normal scenario, we're confronted with groups who haven't been there, who maybe don't want to go there. And I think especially if you work in the corporate world.
Yeah. Oh God.
I think
oh God, it's painful.
It's just the culture. So how do you educate, or how do you create the space for a group to at least have a sneak peek in this mindset, or to try that mindset on for the duration, at least, of your workshop, so that you can work together in a constructive way?
Yeah, I love your question. So the first thing is to model the behavior. I mean, it changes the tone in the room. And so, and it's not dissimilar to when I first met I have 2 Zen teachers, and the first time I met, I was like a mess. I crashed into the Zendo. I was like I was a wreck. My life was a shit show. It was bad. And I sat in front of this woman, and she was sitting with her legs crossed on the floor. And she just was non-reactive. She was holding space, but she wasn't saying anything. She wasn't judging me. She wasn't asking me questions. She was just holding space and peacefulness. So she demonstrated composure. And so in a way, facilitators can do that too. And again, it doesn't mean that I'm not saying we're like illuminated beings. I'm just saying that when we're in this mind state of being a facilitator, modeling the container is valuable, because then people start to trust you. They start to think of you as a person who's on their side, a person who is interested in something that is beneficial for them. So it doesn't have to be spoken. It can absolutely be embodied. And then the other thing is the things you design for them to do, right? So I like doing games, what I call games, that are not subversive, but that are provocative, to invite an inquiry into their experience. Now, sometimes it's just straightforward problem solving, and you're just doing a supply chain map and, whatever. It's like, that's not, the opportunity isn't there. But I do personally create opportunities for awareness, and in a way that's accessible and non-threatening, because that is important. People have to feel safe, and they have to feel respected, and in a way almost loved by you, in order to be receptive to even those invitations,
Yeah. I love that you use the word love. And I'm thinking of a distinction of love between the parents' love and the lover's love, where they want to be loved, but more of a like parents, without going into this space, but you love parents because they're strong and they set boundaries.
Yeah.
And not because everything is, not because of the unconditionality.
Right. Totally. Yeah. It's like and maybe the word is compassion. I'm not sure. It's like they're sort of intermingled I think, it's interesting because there's a phenomenon of respect. It's not like it's obviously not romantic love, and it's not parental love, but there is parenting that goes on in terms of if someone's sort of having a moment, you can create a space where they can calm down. Yeah. Like if they're like you would a child.
Without being the savior.
Oh, absolutely. Because that's the thing. It's like if you move into that role, then they don't have the opportunity to regulate themselves. So, yeah.
And I think, well, I'm not a parent, so what can I say?
Me neither.
But that's, I think, a trap that many parents fall into, that they want to be the savior and to do it for them.
Oh, and I think it's absolutely, it's so appealing because you get to be heroic, and then you get to that's what I would think of as a boundary violation in terms of the developmental capacity of the younger being. But that happens all the time.
Yeah. And it's the same with groups. As soon as the ego comes into play and facilitators us wanting to be heroic and them succeeding and presenting the designs that we have prepared for them.
Totally. Well, that's why I think that nuance is so interesting, because facilitation, like the language in English, or at least my conception of it, is that you are just sort of creating an environment that allows for them to become their best selves, but you are not the intervening hero. You set them up to be successful, and you are there if things go off the rails, and you support their places they get stuck, and you help them get unstick, but you're not saving them.
Yeah.
You're not fixing their problem. And you're not, people do, but I'm just saying in an ideal situation, they get to grow into the challenge that is being presented, and you are facilitating that process. You're not doing that for them.
Yeah. And what makes a good, in your eyes, an experience? What makes a good workshop design? And I heard you using the word game.
Yeah, I do. I use the word game a lot, and it's like I do. If certain environments have a reaction to it or are allergic to it, I'm agnostic. I'll use a different term. In fact, that just happened like a couple of weeks ago. There was a corporate, big pharmaceutical company, and they were like, we can't use the word game. And I was like, okay, well, good luck taking it out of my team, but okay, because that's what we. But anyway, what makes a good workshop design? Oh God, that's a tough one. Okay, so if I were to give some commonalities, I would say that people leave feeling better than when they came in, like just on a base level. I want them to leave feeling like energized, connected, healthy mentally, if, like just in a temporary state, and productive, like something good occurred that they needed, but that's just sort of the overview. There's also, to me, it's like, I like it when people find the edges of what's hard. So like the learning edge, so if I throw them a softball and like, how is that interesting? It's like, I like to challenge people and where they can be uncomfortable even. And that is healthy because I'm saying you have the ability to be uncomfortable together and get through that and be better on the other side. So I think a sequence of games, like what I call a game sequence, is really well designed for all these different layers of experiences. And I also refer to a lot of multisensory facilitation. So I'm very aware of different learning modalities. Some people learn by drawing, some people learn by movement, some people learn by listening, etc. So it has attentiveness to those factors, and also has attentiveness to extroversion and introversion. So sometimes people don't want to interact with 5 people that they just met or whatever. So, and also I like to get people outside and inside, so moving in and out of your physical environment. So for me, good workshop design is a lot. It's a robust design process. It's not a slap ass, recipes together. And it can be, but I can't stand designs like that. But it takes me a longer time than normal people to design a experience, because I'm really aware of the people, what's happening in the learning journey in all these different areas, and where is it going. And I don't know if I could make it simpler. The one time I had to do it recently, I surrendered, but it was hard. Yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you for walking me through. And I think that's the art of it, right? To break it down, to make it so simple. It's not easy for you. It's not easy to make it simple.
Yeah.
But then if the group comes out at the end, like, oh, something happened. We have a result and we didn't even see this coming.
Yeah. And if they feel closer to each other, so they feel or slightly less annoyed, because if the culture is, coming in hot with not a lot of good energy, but if that energy has gotten better, that's a victory. One of the many victories where you might have done something with a person that normally you would only have a certain type of conversation with, and that conversation is always fraught or something. And in this experience, you had a totally different sandbox to be in together, and it was healthy and relational for them. Yeah, that's a win,
And when you said they're outside and inside components, I even thought outside and inside ourselves. So they're kind of the self-reflection components and the sharing components.
I love that you said that, because I'm working on this book about collaboration, and I have these systems of inner collaboration and outer collaboration. And that's what I refer to when I say inner collaboration. I mean internal collaboration with your own self that then impacts your capacity for outer collaboration. And so it is so crazy, because sometimes I look back at things I've designed and I'm like, oh my God, I really challenged them to do things that I don't think that they would a lot of people wouldn't necessarily do, which is like, what is your emotional landscape right now? And like drawing a picture of a body and identifying emotions in the body with color and then naming those feelings, I mean, it's not groundbreaking, but it's not something all people will do. Yeah.
What I love about that, it's courageous for the facilitator to present that.
Yeah.
And it's courageous for the participant to go there. And I think depending on your courage as a facilitator and how you present it, you create the space that is safe enough for the participants to go there.
Exactly. And if they resist, you welcome that.
Yeah.
So, because I've been teaching doodling. Think about that. So I've been teaching doodling in environments that take themselves very seriously. So in order to get that to happen, I had to welcome all cynicism, all judgment, all resistance, and just be with it until people were expressed. And I just wasn't reacting. I was like, that makes sense. I totally get why you would feel that way. And let's try it and see what happens, And so I have a lot of experience making people do things that they wouldn't normally do, because it's an invitation. It's not a demand. And so it's and I'm totally fine with them saying whatever they want. People have said the craziest stuff. One of my favorite comments was, I was teaching doodling, and this person made this comment about, we don't have to believe that doodling is valuable just because this lady says that it is. And I was like,
and you were this lady.
Yeah. And I was like, that is true. I was like, that good point. I'm glad that you let me prove that it's valuable. You don't have to believe, it's not personal.
Yeah.
And so, and I want inquiry. I want people to ask questions. So it's that is how you can earn trust. It's no question is off limits. I'm not offended, because if a facilitator gets offended or defensive around a question, what does that do? It changes everything in the room. Then people are like, oh, I can't ask her stuff. She'll get pissed.
And because it just signals that you're insecure, actually.
Insensitive, insecure and not confident about the process. And does that happen? Sure, of course. I'm a human being person. But when that happens, you recover and just say, oh, wow, I wish I had done that differently. Let me try that again. Right. And so it's okay. It's just in the moment, you just stumble, recover, and try it again. And that is also part of Gamestorming. That's the improvisational aspect of Gamestorming, which is that's why I feel like facilitation was my destiny in some way, because all of the things I was learning made me a little more skillful in that arena, but I wasn't planning it. Like, okay, life. Okay, cool. I'll do that.
So how did it then happen? What's the story of behind Gamestorming?
Oh, that was a fun story. So I was working at the Grove, which was very fortunate because I didn't even know I knew nothing. I was coming out of public policy school. So I had a master's in public policy, and I moved to San Francisco, and I didn't have a job for a few months. And I was like a temp. You know what a temp agency is? They just place you at different random jobs. So I was like doing just really like low bar, like serving muffins at meetings. I mean, it was just, and I was a very educated, qualified person, but I was doing like real menial tasks. And then I ended up at the Grove through 9 degrees of separations, because David said it was hiring. So I was working there, and then just for 2 years, and then I left to start my own business in Austin. And I was teaching, graphic facilitation. And at a certain point, I had a dream about the book. And I was like, I called it the Visual Thinking Playbook. And I remember I had met Dave Gray because he ran VizThink, which was, I was a huge fan of Explain, which was information design, infographics, before it was cool. And I was running a VizThink community, but I remember I called Dave and I said, like, we should write a book and we should call it the Visual Thinking Playbook. And then, to his credit, he has an incredible mind. Dave does. I don't know if you ever met him, but he has a really imaginative, wonderful mind. And so he had like a real strong sense of the operating system for Gamestorming. And so it happened naturally. Like, we didn't have to force it. And I had no idea how much of an impact it would have. He open sourced it, and that was his idea too. And that was smart, because we didn't want to trademark or, copyright or make it unavailable. And that made a difference, because it was like, here's a cookbook, go make some food, Yeah. So that was a wonderful journey, and we're actually working on the 2nd edition right now. But I know, nice. I know, I'm so excited, because we're going to just update it with like virtual and, other things that readers have requested that weren't in the first book. So that's in the process.
Thank you. Isn't it beautiful when the stars just align and things become easy? Mm-hmm. We don't have to force them.
Yes. My God. It's been a while, because, there's like finding the resonance and then following that is a practice in itself.
Because we don't grow up with that things can be easy.
Exactly. It's always
work is supposed to be hard, and it's difficult, and we have to suffer.
Totally. And like, you have to control and predict and like, grab things. It's like, what?
Yeah. Last year, my mantra was, what if it was easy? So I plastered all my walls with sticky notes asking the question, what if it was easy?
Oh my God.
And I found myself in different situations, just receiving an email, trying to reply, and emotion. Okay, what if it was easy? Taking a step back. How does the most easy solution look like?
Wow. And did it come to you, the easier solution?
Yes.
Wow.
Very often it takes a run first.
Yeah.
Running is my new meditation. I used to meditate a lot, and now it's running.
Yeah. Yes. That's the other question that is in the ballpark of that, is how simple are you willing to let this be? And it's like, that's another one, right? Isn't that good?
It hurts almost.
I know.
It goes straight into the ego.
I know. I swear, because I have the same problem. Like, it's not overthinking. I don't know that I go into that space, but it's like almost like branching understandings, and like it can just go infinitely, because it's like, oh, there's another trail that is built onto this model in my mind. And so how simple can it be? I'm like, oh my God. I remember I designed an agenda recently with a co-facilitator friend of mine, and watching his process, part of me was horrified, because I was like, this is the fastest. I told him like several times, I was like, this is the fastest I've ever put an agenda together in my career. And I'm observing my reaction to it because I was like really uncomfortable, and I mean, I'd never, it took like 3 hours, and I was like, it was like a 4-hour event, and designing the agenda took 3 hours. I was like,
wow. How did the event go?
So, okay, great question, because a lot of how it goes is contingent on the perception of the client. And so if I was speaking it from my point of view, it'd be different from how I'd say for them. And so I think they were really happy. I wonder, because it was his client, not my client. So I think he had conversations I didn't have, but I didn't hear any complaints. I heard appreciation. I heard gratitude. I heard like that kind of stuff. So, but in my mind, I knew that there could have been a solution that was better. And that it could have been more elegant. And so it was great to witness, because I came back and I thought, am I overcomplicating my design process? I don't think I am, because the output is good, and like the people are always like, wow, that was special, but it's not efficient. And there is something to be said for efficiency in design.
What do you mean? Can you give an example?
Well, it's like, okay, so if I were to design that 4-hour experience, I would have interviewed multiple stakeholders prior to that. If I could get access to them, we only had 3 weeks or something to design it. So that was a factor, but I would have interviewed multiple stakeholders, and I would have asked them a lot of questions. So I never come into an experience just cold, not knowing anything about the culture, the group. Yeah, or the context, or the dynamics, or the leadership structure, or what's happened when they had this meeting last year. What did they do? Like all the questions. And then that informs so much of my design process. So efficiently, I would just not do that. I mean, he didn't do that, and I was horrified.
I think it's a gamble. It can backfire.
You step on toes and make mistakes, and that's totally fine. It's just, for me, it's not natural for me to do that. It's like, I mean, I would never design a car without knowing who I'm designing for and where they're going and what do they need in the car and why are they going? And, it's just but I'm trying to understand how they did feel about that actually, because we went to dinner afterward. The main client, the main stakeholder, she had a good relationship with my friend already. So I feel like that relationship is still in place and she felt good about it. So I did not ask the kinds of questions I would have asked in a debrief because it was his client. And I didn't want to reveal that I was concerned that she might not have got what she wanted. So I didn't have clean information around that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And what I hear, you said that they were wowed and the group was happy. And I think if you've never experienced what excellent looks like, many groups are very happy with mediocre.
Oh my God, don't even get me started. It kills me. Like when I was working as the innovator-in-residence at Mural, it was a whole generation of people who didn't know what facilitation was. And they had a toy, which was the visual collaboration tool. And we're playing with the toy and so it's okay to play with a toy and not know you have to experiment, but to have no curiosity around the background of that practice was rough. It was rough. And I think there's a lot of that going on all over the place.
Yeah, and I have mixed feelings about the fact that facilitation is not a protected kind of profession, because on the one hand, I think you cannot put it in a box.
It's hard.
And facilitation means different things to different people. There's a book sleeping inside of me that I would love to be the editor of, or how do you call someone who brings the book together?
Yeah, the editor.
On what we speak about when we speak about facilitation.
Ooh.
With different contributors having just an essay.
Oh, like the curator.
Curator. Yeah, curator.
Cool.
Because I think it's, right? I think this can be very interesting.
God, I would love to hear the perspective of a whole host of, because I saw you had Juanita Robertson on your,
Yes.
in your prep materials.
Yeah.
And so in her world, facilitation is, I think it's probably more of a spiritual practice and it's a more emotional. I don't know for sure, but that's my perception. But I think, yeah. So, because here's the other thing is, I was just taking a chaplaincy program. It's like a 2-year program. And I was in the first year and they were facilitating in environments that were very, very different from any of the ones I would facilitate in. But I think there's commonalities, that are pretty basic around being a steward of the energy and holding the space and creating a container and, designing experience. But what would you think would come up in a book that you curated, like what we speak about when we speak of facilitation?
So I would expect that, as you say, that there are some commonalities that are always true. Mm-hmm. So I interviewed Tom Goldhand on the podcast, and he is a teacher of improv dance and ecstatic dance.
Nice.
An ecstatic dance DJ. And when he facilitates, he uses the same tools. There's a beginning, a middle, and the end.
Yeah.
It starts with creating it's connection over content. It's creating safe space, is holding the container, is dealing with emotions and strong personalities.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that we do.
Yeah.
Independent of what we facilitate. And still, as you say, there's some facilitate the emotional journey, other facilitate a process.
Yeah.
Then there's this, there are those who use very clear processes. Like when I listen to you, you have your agenda, and then there is not much space for, the group decided that they want something different, so ditch the agenda and we do something different.
Oh, no, I have a plan A, B, and C. Yeah. And I mean, what I envy about other facilitators, like I have a lot of applied improvisation friends, and they're so skillful. It's like they are encyclopedias of what another thing could be. And I do not hold those things in my head. Like I have a spreadsheet and databases and Trello. Like I have places where I deposit my games. Some of them I can pull up, but I don't have that stored in my database. And so when I imagine a scenario where something needs to go another way, I'll actually have a plan B or C or D. But it's expansive and contractive depending on what's happening, but you still have to get to the goal, which might be, for the leader, whoever brought you in. And so, no, there's fluidity in it, but so it's not prescribed. In other words, like it's not a hard stop on a lot of experiences. If the group still needs to chew on something, or they need to move the energy, or they need to unpack something, but then you have to take a 10-minute break and like redesign it.
Yeah.
And that always is so stressful for me, because that's why I have to have a list of other options, because I cannot just in the moment be like, oh, I know. Yeah. It's just not it's not my strength. So I love it when I'm a co-facilitator. I have that is their strength. I love that so much. I'm like,
the power of co-facilitation, to have a complementary.
I only do co-facilitation at this point.
Interesting. So can I double click on that?
Yeah, please do.
Because last week, I think I had a conversation with Philip from Session Lab, and they just launched the State of Facilitation report.
Oh, nice.
And interesting stuff. And well, what came out of the conversation is actually the report created more questions than answers, which I think is a good thing.
Good thing.
And one thing was that most facilitators facilitate, at least those who replied to the survey, facilitate solo.
Wow. And I did when I started. Yeah,
exactly. And this is what I find fascinating, is that the beginning facilitators tend to facilitate more solo, and the more experienced one with someone.
Yeah.
And I have my theory for why that is, and I would love to hear yours.
Oh, I want to hear yours, and then I'll share mine. I promise I won't change mine based on yours.
I believe that it's a maturity in how to be in a conversation with a client. So as a more mature facilitator, you already charge higher rates and you know your value. So you have a different maturity or different confidence to negotiate with clients. And then it's easier to say, okay, for this, I only do with a co-facilitator, and that's a price. Whereas beginning facilitators, they already struggle to find clients.
Right.
And to charge money for it. And then asking for a second one.
Yeah. That's interesting because that's a pricing related conversation.
What is your theory?
Well, I have to say, I've always been price insensitive, which means that I have always charged what feels fair for me too, and been willing to be rejected. I just always have. Yeah, because I'm not interested in like self-sabotaging and like I'm not interested in being. Now, have I been burnt out many times at the end of experiences? For sure. That's why I have a co-facilitator at all times at this point, because there's so many benefits of having a co-facilitator. It's just ridiculous. The collaborative possibilities are way better. So for me, it's never been about pricing, although I do think your theory is probably there's a lot of accuracy there. But for me, I've always been like, no, it's going to cost this much. And here's why. So to me, if you can articulate the why and sound credible, then they believe they're getting the value from the price. So, I had to just learn the hard way that like, I think when you're a DIY, for me, it's like I was very DIY and I was kind of an island. So collaborating, like I had to learn that as a skill over time because I was just very like, you can't count on anyone. I had some like beliefs around like, you can't rely on people and you have to do everything yourself. So it was more around the journey of recognizing that, no, I don't have to exhaust myself in order to be good at something. You know what I mean? And so after you facilitate like many, many, many times, it's like, why am I doing this by myself? There's no reason for me to do that,
Yeah.
And I think if you, maybe your margins are slightly less, like if people don't feel comfortable doubling down on the price, it's still worth it because the workload is distributed differently anyway.
You have more energy left at the end of it.
Oh my God.
And then it's an art to find the right fit of a co-facilitator.
Yeah.
That you're complementary enough to really benefit.
Yeah.
But not too different so that you would get into clashes.
I know. That is so true because I think finding the tango partner is the practice. So that's why it was so awesome because I have some reliable tango partners, but I'm always interested in like learning from other people and bringing and experimenting and in, not in environments that there be the cost to the client would be like not a high risk situation. Let me put it that way. So that's why it was awesome to do this recent collaboration with this other person because he worked very differently from me and I learned a ton. And I don't know if he learned from me. I have no idea. I know I learned from him. Yeah, I know. I'd have to ask him later. Like, did you take in anything? But what I trusted about he and I is that if we had in the moment a difference of what needed to occur, that we would support each other. So I knew that we were right. So that is for me, the baseline is like, are you going to yes and support and be supportive and be an ally for me in that moment? Or are you going to like, critique inappropriately in front of other, like you can't do stuff like that. You have to yes and your partner.
Yeah.
And I knew he would do that. So I was like, we're going to be fine. Yeah,
it's almost do they know the improv rules is yes and make your partner look good.
Look good. Yeah. Don't question them in front of other people. That's not appropriate. Like that's amateur hour. When people do that, I'm like, you are new, clearly. Because that is not okay. And if that happens and we discuss it afterward and they're defending no. I'm like, no, you have to be willing
own your shit.
Yeah, you have to own. Yeah. So that's a maturity thing too. But I'm grateful. I'm so glad. I forgot that I used to facilitate by myself. It's been so long. Like I refuse, It's
beautiful.
It's exhausting. Yeah.
And even if something happens last minute, to have a backup.
Yeah. Oh, totally. My God. I mean, oh my God, like airlines flying nowadays is nuts. And so it's like, just logistically, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Process wise, it makes sense. And relationally, it makes sense. And for the client, they get a more robust experience and they see stylistic differences. Like it's just a win, 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 win.
Yeah.
If you are willing to just price it, and value it.
Thank you.
Yeah. we should try co-facilitating.
Yes, it could be fun.
It would be fun. And we just have to practice yes-anding and learning from each other and unpacking what we do differently. And like, if it's a process of respect and play and joy and experimentation, it's wonderful.
Yeah. Do you have a sort of vetting process, either formal or conscious or unconscious, of how you find, or where do you find red flags or hell yeses for co-facilitators?
Well, that is a really good question. I haven't thought about consciously. This sounds sort of unprofessional, but I need them to be like warm-hearted. I need them to. I love intellectuals and I love cerebral people, and I myself am cerebral, but I need them to have a heart and a mind. So not just a really good mind. That for me is a weird requirement,
I wouldn't say that, because for me, I would translate it into caring.
Yeah, they need to care about me, themselves, and the group.
Exactly. And to hold space and we talked about this kind of parent.
Yeah, seriously, like a good parent.
Yeah.
And also they need to have a level of humility. So it's not about them, and they know that. Like that they're not the expert in the front of the room. And this is really, again, this is like kind of baseline. And I love it when they will experiment with stuff. So the rigidity, is like, I do design robustly and have a plan, but I'm not rigid about it. And so to me, rigidity is an indication of early practice, because I was like that as a graphic recorder. Oh my God. I used to get their PowerPoint decks, if they had a script, I would get that. I would like architect almost every minute of the journey and have visual templates, but because I was terrified, it was so clearly an indication. And so I totally respect that. And at this stage in my own life and career, I need a mature facilitator who can flex with the process and understands that that's required. And then after that, it would be about what tools do they bring? Like, what methods do they enjoy? What kinds are they, like, kind of a full range? Like, will they do interpretive dance in the session, or would they be willing to try things? That's why I love your NDB community. And I haven't joined yet because I am moving and I was in Tanzania, but I'm so curious about what are people trying, because I'm sure you find people that you're like, I would love to facilitate or collaborate with that person or learn from that person.
Yeah, that's what happens a lot, actually.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And some of that is just a mystery. Like, you don't really know why but you're just like, they complete me,
Yeah, it's an energy thing, the chemistry that works.
Yes, that I'm sure.
Yeah.
That's
and
cool.
It's interesting. I haven't thought about it for facilitation. And now that you say it, this chemistry thing going on, that sometimes with someone you meet them and you can spend hours talking, and others you sit down and, well, I can talk about me and I feel like a vegetable. There's just not a single smart thought popping up in my mind, not a single question appearing.
Do you notice when that happens to you, do you notice any qualities that they are exhibiting that might shut you down?
I think at the podcast, what I noticed, so I became very good in just stopping podcast interviews and saying, okay, this is not working for me.
This doesn't feel right. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is when someone tries to teach me or to explain, to tell me.
Yeah.
For me, the podcast is really about a conversation.
Exploring.
And all my guests get me to a point where I want to know, I want them to tell me.
Right.
But I ask for it.
Yeah. Well, you have deep curiosity. So it sounds to me like if they're not curious and they're more like knowing and then downloading to you, well, that would be a big turnoff for me too. Yeah. I'm like, you're not above me.
Exactly. I'm not here to just record your voice. And then, I mean, it's my show. It's my house.
Well, that sounds reasonable to me.
Yeah. Reactions are interesting if I do that.
Oh, yeah. Actually, I had that reaction when I was in a meeting recently where it was so clear to me that the leader of this little meeting that was just a small group had no interest in what other people's opinions, perspectives. I mean, just none. Like, similarly, I just lost interest. I was like, this is not the relationship I want to be in. And I honor that, because I'm like, if you really are getting a good read, and it doesn't mean they're like that all the time, but if you're getting a good read where there's nobody home and basically they're mentally masturbating in their own world, fuck that,
Yes.
Just have no interest. And why make the effort to try?
Yeah.
If you're getting clear feedback, clear system feedback that it's all about them, it's not interesting.
Yeah.
It's not interesting.
And it's funny. Yeah. I realized that my mind starts wandering. So if I'm in a podcast interview where suddenly I think, oh, let me put this on my grocery list. It's usually the moment okay, something is going wrong. This is not working for me. Let's discuss this.
But you've accepted that, and you feel clear about that.
Yeah.
That's
it took me maybe 150 episodes.
Of course. Well, because you have to give yourself permission, and also it seems impolite, or whatever hurdles you had to go through in your mind to let yourself do that.
Yeah.
That's big. I applaud you.
Yeah. And okay, that was a big tangent. So we have that often. I hear that you have the same. With some, you do have conversations easily, and with others not.
Some conversations that flow, and others that don't. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, because I am very curious and I ask people a lot of questions, they often do open. But if I don't hear questions back, right? So if it's like a one-way street, then I won't pursue another dialogue, most likely, unless I have some reason to. I mean, I feel very fortunate in this facilitation world, because you get to choose your destiny. You get to choose who you are, who your client is, who you work with. I mean, not all, and again, like, you have to have a sort of baseline of financial income, because I've had like shitty clients for sure, but not forever, because you start going, oh yeah, that didn't feel nourishing. It didn't feel restorative. It didn't feel like we were like a good stewardship of our energy. So I'm going to choose not that over time. But yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, there's plenty of people. Their life is short, and there are so many people that have no interest in what is going on in my world too.
Yeah.
And it's like, when you can find that, come back to me, good sir. But until then, I'm interested.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's somehow early signals, and I wonder whether it's with potential co-facilitators similar. Sometimes I meet a facilitator and I'm like, oh yeah, I think we can dance.
Right.
And with others.
That's a great question. Yeah. Well, I think, for me, I think it has to do, so I call it the channel. So, and I think there is a nervous system component to it, where like, can our nervous systems be co-regulated? So I don't know if you've heard the term dyadic regulation, but it's like if you're two horses, right? And the horses are such sensitive creatures, and they're constantly giving each other, and humans, I mean, human to horse, horse to human, giving you a signal of where your nervous system is operative. And I think that goes on with, I know that goes on with human beings all the time. And your nervous system scans 4 times a second on average for, am I safe? Is this a good relationship for me? Like that. It's wisdom, deep, deep wisdom. So I think partly it's below conscious awareness. It's like, this is not a horse I want to run with.
Interesting. Yeah. It reminds me of a research that I once read, that these fire walks, so people walking over the hot coals, that if you have partners or family members where one walks over the hot coals and one observes, their heart rates kind of adjust.
Oh, you mean the one watching?
Synchronize. Yeah.
Whoa. Because they're empathizing with their experience or something. Wow.
I guess so. So very spooky.
Yeah. It's like quantum entanglement,
Yeah. Very spooky. And maybe it's the same.
Action at a distance. You know that expression? It's a physics expression, spooky action at a distance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Spooky action that you cannot explain. Yeah. These
That's
particles.
Why I think there's like conscious variables, but there's also a mystery.
Yeah.
And there's also like a physiological kind of tuning fork.
Yeah.
And I think it has a lot to do with safety, like psychological, emotional, physical safety, that is like, am I going to be taken care of in this relationship? And so I think you can and should trust those instincts.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to first start by building connection and trust in a group before doing anything else.
Yeah, I know. That's what's so it's like really heartbreaking. I don't know how much time we have left, 9 minutes or something. It's really heartbreaking when I am in a group and I can see that the leader or the sort of big head cheese creates fear in others. Because it's like, you're not going to get much great work out of them because they can't regulate their nervous system sufficiently to open the channel, to then have things flow, to encourage the collective intelligence and like that. And so it just is always a bummer.
What do you do in these cases?
I lower my expectations around what I can do, and I also don't take it on. Like if I'm in those client interviews and I'm hearing from people, because people will often share directly if it's, it's anonymous research, and they'll share some, because I'll ask, like, what are the dynamics of the team? Or like, if you ask questions, how are questions perceived? Or if you make a mistake, right? That's a big indicator. If you're not free to ask questions, that's a big indicator of authoritarian.
Low psychological safety.
Totally. And like authoritarian leadership. And so sometimes they'll reveal without having to say anything explicit. And I think in those cases, a lot of times I wouldn't take it on because in a way it's colluding with a leader that I don't really respect or like. So do I want to help that person achieve their agenda? Not at the expense of the people there, So it's tricky. Those are like evaluating and discerning aspects of it. But that, like, it's earlier when you said about corporate, man, it's like a lot of those environments, God, I just want people to get out of them. They're so hierarchical. They're so like based on competition, and they're so like low emotionality. They just look, I couldn't do it. I can't function in those environments, but people do. And I always want to help them, So a lot of times I'll hope that the leader isn't there. Like I'll design it where he or she comes in and out and they can see the work product of the group and they can weigh in on it, but they're not actually there when we're doing things.
Good strategy.
Yeah. Because at least you can get some more from them if they feel safer.
Yeah.
Oh God. But yeah, it's like, there's a I don't use the word toxic that often, but there's like a noxiousness that makes it less possible to do great work, Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I have 2 of my regular questions still open. I wonder whether they were answered, but I still asked them explicitly. What's your number 1 facilitation challenge?
My number 1 facilitation challenge. Oh my God. Do you mean for me personally or for the group? Like, either one.
Mm-hmm.
I think getting to do what I actually personally want to do the most. Like I want to teach this sort of literacy around collaboration, and I want to have a group of people go through this process. So I think how am I articulate? What I mean is, like I want an environment where I could take them through every experience that I have designed that would awaken their understanding. And I don't get to do that yet. So that's a challenge, but maybe that's different from the spirit of your question. I'm not sure. It's like you said, what was the language you used about the book that you have, sleeping inside?
Mm-hmm.
So that's like that. It's like, for me, it's like, there's this collaboration journey, like a training that I want to take people on. And it's sleeping in here. And it's like, when and where can I create that river that people will go down?
Yeah.
Because I think they would be changed, in beautiful ways at the end.
And what I love about that is the concept of collaboration being a skill.
Yes.
Not a noun.
Yes. Totally. It is. I had to learn it too. Yeah. Like,
because it's usually we say that it's something that happens or it doesn't happen.
Like a phenomenon, like something that emerges or doesn't.
Yeah. But I haven't heard it so explicitly that it's actually something that it's a skill that you can learn.
Yes.
And grow. Yeah.
Yes. And it makes you a more decent human being. And that's why actually I'm obsessed with this book that I'm working on, that it's always hard to write a book because there's 6 ways to publish and multiple strategies for it, and you have to carve out time and so forth. But I have this system of collaboration training that I think is really powerful. And it's not about, like, the superficial sort of interpretation of it is that it teaches you to work and play well with others, and that's good. But the radical version of it is that it actually makes you an ethical person.
So you have to be humble in order to collaborate.
Yes.
Except that you don't know everything.
Exactly. And you have to respect the existence of others and honor the truth of their spiritual nature, meaning that they're not an object. Like, you can't objectify people if you're really deeply a collaborator.
You have to respect their boundaries. Communicate your own.
Yes. And so your humanity is brought into that equation, as is theirs. And so to me, like, if you actually look at it, Miriam, like, if you take the spectrum of like narcissism or sociopathy or psychopathy, and then you go to the other end, which is like extreme altruism or deep empathy, people on this end cannot collaborate at all. Do not have that functionality, because that requires a sense that the other person is as important as you are.
Narcissist. That's basically the definition of a narcissist, right? That they don't.
Yeah, that's right. Other people are objects for their own end.
But at the other end of the spectrum, they cannot either, because they lack the self-esteem. So
you mean, so empathy. Go ahead.
Okay, deep empathy maybe, but extreme altruism would basically only live for the other person.
Well, if you mean martyrdom, right? Yeah, so I don't mean martyrdom where you don't count.
Yeah.
And only the other person matters. Okay. I don't mean that.
Okay.
Yeah. But to your point, there's ditches that you can fall in either aspect. If you're self-flagellating and you don't honor yourself, is included in the stewardship of selves.
Yeah.
You're not excluded from that, right?
And that's actually interesting, because the moment you exclude yourself, and I think that's even people who don't suffer from extreme altruism fall into the trap of neglecting their self-worth. And especially if you have maybe a hierarchy in a collaboration, then neglecting your own worth and only be in service of the other is not collaboration. No,
that's correct. It's actually objectifying yourself.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's this place in between where that's why we said not one, not two. There was like a potential title for this podcast, and it was not one, not two. Yeah. Which means that you still exist inside of this system, but you're also part of the collective. And so they're both true. It sounds paradoxical, but they're actually both true. So you can offer something and also be offered to, and you can co-create. And like, there's a sort of dependent co-arising that occurs because you're all there. But that to me is like essentially an ethical compass. It's like for humanity. So for me, collaboration is much, much more important than I think people perceive it to be. Like, if you're really good at it, it means that you have deep capacity to love and care for others, Yeah,
and yourself.
Exactly. Thank you for pointing that out explicitly. When I say others, I don't mean excluding us.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yes. Looking forward to that one. And then hopefully you come back to the show to speak more about your book.
I would love to.
Yes,
I already invited myself.
Yes, please.
and before we close, Amsterdam too. Go ahead.
One more question. What makes a workshop fail?
Oh, I think a lot of the things we were talking about, actually, like your workshop can recover from, mediocre design, but it cannot recover from broken trust or a disrespect, or it can later. But in that moment, if you lose the confidence and the faith of the people in the room, it will fail in terms of getting a good outcome. Yeah.
I'm so glad I asked the question.
Yeah.
Oh, I love the reply. It can recover from mediocre design, and it cannot recover from broken trust.
No.
Mic dropping moment.
Mic drop him. It's just, if you try to limp along after that, it's just painful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I love your questions. I love your curiosity. I just adore it. It's such a gift. My God. I mean, I was reading the questions you sent last night at dinner, and I was like, I just wish she would be my friend, you know? Because it's not that common to have people that have such wonderful community. I mean, I'm so curious about the NDB community and how y'all play, and, you know, what I wouldn't be in there, you know?
You will.
I know. I'm so grateful that you built that.
Yeah.
Like, that must be really, I hope that's rewarding for you, you know?
It is. It is.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to hang out without the screen.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, you could come back to Portland and remember your high school self.
Yes, definitely. Portland was a good place.
It was? That's awesome.
Yeah.
I've only been there twice, and then we're just going to move there. But yeah, no, I'm really grateful, and I am going to find you.
Yes.
Not like in a stalky way.
You may stalk me. I'm in Amsterdam.
That's good.
Only the doorbell is broken at the moment, so you might ring me before.
I'll throw some at your window. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. My pleasure.
Thank you for staying tuned and for listening to the show. I know how busy you are, and I appreciate that you're sharing your two most valuable resources with me and my guest, your time and your attention. If you're looking for more conversation with other facilitators and for a community of practice, why don't you join Never Done Before, the community that I have built, and many of my podcast guests are already members. Visit neverdonebefore.org, and I wish to see you there.